Somebody listen to me and listen good. There are certain businesses and ministries that succeed and stand because their sponsors, their partners are kings. Not common men, not mere men. Kings, men of impact, men of power, men of influence, men with the resources, men with a voice. Those businesses require billions. So if you are to engage in them, it is either you become a king or you have a relationship with a king. Because kingship is an office that, number one, will grant you resources, number two, will grant you power, authority, influence. So there are certain things, certain businesses that we cannot do as a church because it requires resources. And those resources, they are only in the hands of kings, presidents, governors, CEOs. So for me, if we have to engage in them, either we raise somebody from our church who is going to sit in that seat of the president, and as he serves his people, the people of the country that has elected him, he shall also favor the church. So if you are to engage in certain business in this kingdom, it's either you become a king or you have a relationship with kings. Somebody listen to me and listen good. When you are looking for a job, when you are looking for an employment, pray and pray hard. Pray so hard that may God take you to palaces. May God take you to places with the kings. May God connect you. May God make you to be employed with the kings. Men in authority, men in government, men with the power, men with the resources. Let your employer not become somebody who's also struggling. Pray that God will take you to palaces and state houses, white houses. Pray that God will take you to family businesses of these great multi-billionaires around. Pray that may God take you to the companies of these kings, presidents, government officials around. Pray so hard that may God connect you, put you to sit with the kings. And then after praying that God to make you sit with the kings, also pray that may God again make you to find favor with those kings. It is one thing to find yourself in the government. It is another thing to find yourself with the president or with the man who controls the helm of the affairs in that government. It is one thing to be employed in a company that is run by one king somewhere. But it is another thing if you have found favor with that king in yourself. You have a relationship, personal relationship with that king. Either business relationship or just personal relationship. So after praying that God to take you to places where kings sit, environment with kings, offices with kings, men of power, influence, governance, authority, resources, ask God, cry to God that may you find favor with those kings. The palace here can be the wealthiest company around. The lucrative employment, lucrative businesses. And then tell God, ask God that He may make you to find favor and friends, or make you to serve at a personal level the top management in that company. Do you know, do you understand, has it ever entered you that Elijah's decree of the 3.5 years of drought, God was behind that decree? When Elijah stood and said, there will be no rain or dew for in this territory until I say so. He was speaking because he was moved by God. It was God that made this way to happen. This was a way that God was introducing Elijah to King Ahab. Imagine, God had to look for a way to introduce Elijah the prophet to Ahab. And his way of introducing Elijah to King Ahab was through this decree. And Ahab was already into Baalism. Ahab was lost into Baalism. Ahab was lost into idol worship. And he was the king. So just imagine. The king is already in Baalism. What about now the people that is ruling? Most definitely there is going to be a law that forces everybody to worship Baal, the god that he worships. So because God wanted to rescue his people, God had to bring Elijah into partnership with a king. God had to connect Elijah with a king, man in government. Because to stop Baalism, the decree also was still going to come from the government. Because it was government that allowed it. Yet Elijah is somebody who nobody knows who he is, where he comes from, where he was born. Nobody knows much about it. So, if he had to appear before King Ahab and tell him that he wants to destroy this thing of Baalism and bring back the sanctity of the altar, Ahab will just laugh and say, take this man to a psychiatrist so that he be checked. Maybe he's mad. So, for God to introduce Elijah to Ahab and make them become great friends, make them to be able to listen to each other, they can negotiate, God had to introduce him through this decree of 3.5 years of drought. And after the 3.5 years of drought, King Ahab could not ignore this man Elijah. He could not ignore him. He could not. So that 3.5 years of drought was a way through which God was introducing Elijah to King Ahab. He could not pay attention. Ahab was so much into Baalism, idol worship, that he could not pay attention to anybody called a prophet of God. He could not. He could not pay it. He could not even listen to them. Except a sign like a drought. That is what King Ahab, who was already into Baalism, could understand. And that was what God brought. A sign of drought. Ahab as the king understood so well that sign. He understood that language, the language of God of bringing a drought. So after the 3.5 years, Ahab was convinced and he was so pushed to the wall and they could negotiate with Elijah. Remember, after Elijah had decreed for the 3.5 years of drought, God told him to go and hide himself because the king had the power. He would command his people to look for that man and be put into prison and killed. So God told him to run and hide. After he went into hiding, King Ahab made a decree and made governors. He made officials, kings of other countries to swear before God that they have not seen Elijah. Imagine King Ahab had placed all the resources of his country in search of one man, Elijah. Why? For the sake of causing drought in Israel. So, after the 3.5 years of drought, Ahab was convinced and he was so pushed that he could not deny negotiating with Elijah. So that was the strategy that God was used of connecting and creating a relationship between Elijah and Ahab. That was the only way that he could make them meet. So I understand that problems can make kings. If you really want to, let me put it in this way. If you want to have a connection, because it is not very easy for kings to pay attention to you. It is not very easy for somebody in the government, a top-ranking government official today, to come and have a connection and a relationship with you who is a common. If you want to have a relationship with this man, ask God for wisdom. Tell God to create a problem that only you can solve in the life of that man. Use your wisdom and skill and observe a problem observe a limitation in the life, in the ministry of that king, in the docket of that king, in the docket of that president, that member of parliament. Look at those limitations and then look for ways to solve those limitations. After you have solved those problems, those limitations, I am telling you for sure, there is going to be a relationship between you and those kings. That is how people become friends with kings. And in fact, it is those kings that are coming to look for you. So work on yourself, work on your skill, perfect your skills so well that kings can come and make a demand of you. They are the one who will come to look for you. Many a times we are the one looking for them, and that is why they always lie to us. They always give us fake appointments. They treat us as commoners. Work on yourself, build, perfect your skills. Work on a project that will attract these kings. The Bible says in Isaiah chapter 60 verse 4 that kings will come to the brightness of your rising, Gentiles to the brightness of your light, and kings to your rising. They only come to your rising. So work on yourself, work on your skills, perfect on that which you are doing. Let it be so good that it can attract the attention of kings. Work on something that will help solve the problem in the life of a king, the life of men in authority, men in power, men of influence, men with resources. They will come to look for you. And when they come to look for you, that is how the connections are built. And what you want to happen in the government will be happen. What you want will happen through them. So, problems, if you can rectify, correct the problems, challenges in the lives of these men of authority, men in power and government, they will look for you. Elijah, after causing chaos, problems in the land, he ran into hiding. And Ahab used the resources of the country to look for him. So kings will look for you if you can solve their problem, because he told the king, Elijah told King Ahab that there will be no rain or dew on this land, this territory, until I myself say so. And then he disappeared. So Ahab knew the only man to solve that problem of taking out those drought was this man Elijah. So he had to look for him. Work on yourself, work on your skill, perfect on those skills until kings will have to look for you, not you looking for them. Instead of you trying to seek for attention from these men in government, men in high-ranking official positions and what, do your work so well. Put it out there. Let it be in the public domain. Let your work speak for you. Let your skills speak for you. Let that gifting in you introduce you to kings. Let kings look for you, because they know when they come, they are not going to be disappointed. What you have, that gifting, is going to solve their problem. So, Ahab had to look for Prophet Elijah by all means. He had to look for him so that he can do away with this issue of drought. So, this was a strategy that God was using. He connected the two, Elijah and Ahab. Why? Why did God connect Elijah and Ahab? Ahab was in government, the leader, the president. Elijah was the prophet who was speaking to God. The reason why God had to connect the prophet with the man in government was because it was Ahab who was the king that had the power to summon and to control the people, because he was the king. Remember, there was already Baalism in the land. It was fully in the hands of the king Ahab, who allowed his wives to introduce Baalism, the gods of Asherah, into the land. It was still this king Ahab who had the power to stop, to summon these people, and then make a decree that there will not be the worship of idols in this land. So God had to partner Elijah with a man in government, the king himself, not any other person in government, but the top ranking, government official, the king, the president himself. The power to summon the people was in the hand of the king. So, listen, God wanted to destroy Baalism in the land. God wanted to bring back his lost glory in the land, which was taken over by idols that were introduced by this woman that Ahab married, Jezebel. But because he could not do that without involving the king, the man in authority, the man in government, because that law was made by a person in the government, the king himself, who is the one who allowed it, signed it. So if he was to take out this law, it was also still through the king. Somebody listen to me. We are in the world of men. There are principles that are engaged here on earth, and not even God can abuse them. There are laws. God is a God of order. He respects his word more than how he honors his name. There are principles here on earth. This earth is controlled by principles. So if those laws were introduced by the president, it was still in the office and the power of the president to abolish them. Not the noise of the people. Not the prayers of Prophet Elijah. No, sir. I told you laws are made in government. So you can be prayerful, but if you are not in government, still those laws are not going to be made. That's why you need to be prayerful, anointed, prayerful, knowledgeable in the things of God and the spirituality, but also be in government, be part of the government, directly or indirectly. So, the system that God had to use, is to pass through kingship, the king, King Ahab. He had to pass through King Ahab. If he was to abolish, if God had to fight Baalism in the land, he had to pass through King Ahab, the office of King Ahab, because it was through that office that Baalism was allowed in the land. Do you want to see how God passed through the office of King Ahab to abolish and fight and destroy Baalism in the land? Look. Look what happened, somebody. After Elijah himself had done